Well, good afternoon and welcome to this presentation. My name is Pierre and I'm a BIRT engineer with Actuate Corporation, and today we'll talk about BIRT. Anybody of you here in the room knows BIRT? I see some, yeah? Okay, good. Okay. So I hope it's going to be instructive. I don't know how far you've been with BIRT, but definitely this is a product that has evolved over the years. So today we'll talk about, or I will talk about BIRT. We'll talk about the designing of BIRT reports as well as the deployment of those reports, but mainly in the open source world. Okay. So I'll give you a quick introduction, quick background about BIRT, and as I said this morning, quick word from the sponsor. So BIRT is obviously an Eclipse project that was initiated back in 2004 by a company called Actuate. So Actuate had been in the business of business intelligence and reporting for many years. Actually, we've been in the business for about 21 years. And in 2004, we decided to go to the Eclipse Foundation and initiate this new project. So for us, it was a new challenge. First of all, going to an open source model. So we're coming from we're just a software editor, and now we were going open source. And the idea behind that was not only to get as many people as possible to jump into the bandwagon and use BIRT, but also to create a new environment that was a bit more open. So it is a top-level Eclipse project, and it is primarily funded and developed by Actuate, although we have contributions from other sources as well. I will not go and read all these bullet items, but this is just to show you that we've had quite a few releases since 2004. Obviously, we started kind of small. We started with some basic ideas, and over the years, by listening to the community, we added some new features. One of the things that we're very strong upon is the ability to get to multiple data sources and all kind of data sources. So this morning, so for those of you who were in the room where I was with Eurotech, you've seen how we can connect to Internet of Things, get data from sensors, from gateways, and take that data on the cloud using web services and display that into visualizations. So we call this a new generation of data visualization technology. Again, going back 10 years, that was really a new generation of data visualization technology. So what we want to do is make the data-driven content development easy. And we found that with Eclipse, you can do that. So Eclipse has a very nice framework, very nice IDE to build reports, to build components. We used a modern web-based design metaphor. So again, going back to 10 years ago, and maybe even more, the tools we had to create reports, to create visualizations, were pretty static. So you would take an element, a component, you put it on a page, and you kind of like decide exactly where to put it. The methodology that we took is more web-based in a sense that we use a lot of grids and tables so that things will reformat nicely and automatically. So it's really that web-based metaphor. It's open and standards-based, so meaning that definitely you can use, it will integrate very well with Java, being on the Eclipse platform. When there's need for scripting, JavaScript will come to the rescue. And for formatting, we want to use standards, so we use CSS for standards. I've just talked about JavaScript, so it's flexible, so you can actually add some programs, some scripting to the reports if you need to. We support libraries and reuse, and that actually comes from the Actuate heritage. The product we had before already made use of libraries. So library meaning that you can create components that you can reuse in all your reports. I always take the example of a logo that you put somewhere in your report. You have like 100 or 200 reports. You change the logo, what do? You don't change 200 reports, you change the library, and then all your reports are modified. So it's a foundation for a range of solutions. So it's not only reporting, it's also data visualizations. It means we can definitely create charts, embed those charts into HTML or web pages. So it's more than just strict reporting. It's actually what we prefer to call it a development environment. A development environment that's geared towards creating data visualizations and reporting, but it is a development environment. It's not a closed box, it's not a black box, it's really, because it's with Eclipse. There's a lot of hooks that you can, by which you can get into the BIRT environment, which makes it a very, very flexible and powerful tool. So it can be simple to use. So you start, like if you're like a novice and you start using the tool, just use the graphical environment, but then you also have the power to create very complex layouts. Now with that, we also have a huge community of BIRT users. So over the years, we're up to about 13 million downloads of BIRT on the Eclipse Foundation as well as on our website. So there's a dedicated website for users. I'm surprised I didn't put it on this slide, but it's called developer.actuate.com, and this is where the BIRT community goes to find information. So information in terms of the documentation, forums, dev share, so you can actually share some tips and tricks and code, the marketplace, and where you can also you can download the latest versions of the product. So it's a very active community. Okay, so we'll look now at designing BIRT reports, some of the characteristics and features of creating a BIRT report. First thing is data access. I don't think that I've ever seen a report or data visualization that doesn't take some data. Otherwise, it's pretty boring. So BIRT offers many ways to get to the data. There's, of course, the standard data sources. So standard data sources being a flat file, being relational databases, more structured data, your non-SQL sources, your big data, MongoDB, etc. I've shown this morning the web services, what I call the POJO data source. So those are all standards in BIRT. The only thing we don't provide with open source are the JDBC drivers. We let you install them. You can just get them from the database providers, but the rest is very standard. There's also the concept of a scripted data source that you can write in Java or JavaScript, and the open data access. The open data access is very important. So there's a lot of new data that we find every year, every month. I mean, something new happens. So we use the community to provide us with new data sources by providing a framework called the ODA, Open Data Access, so that developers can actually contribute to the BIRT project by creating new data sources. One example has been the MongoDB data source. So before we got someone writing an ODA to connect to Mongo, you could just by creating a Pojo, writing some Java classes, get the data. It works. It's a bit more work. It's a bit dirty in a sense. But when someone writes an ODA, then everybody can use that. And we also integrate that later on in our commercial release. So those are actually some examples of contributions from the community. The second thing after the data access is the formatting capabilities. We are in a development tool which is aimed at formatting data, visualizing the data, having people come in and just look at stuff on their screen. So I'll show you in a moment how we build a report, and you'll see how easy it is to use the tool in Eclipse to create your reports. So you can create listings, crosstabs, dashboards. There's also grouping, advanced aggregations, creation of new columns, create multi-sections, sub-reports, etc., etc. So it's a very rich environment for creating reports. Just two examples, not even the best examples of what you can create with BIRT open source. So all this, as I said, comes in the Eclipse environment. So it's very much graphical oriented, lots of drag and drop of elements on the page. It's customizable through cheat sheets and templates. You can actually start a report by having a template. So if you have many reports that will look the same, it's a good idea to do that. And there's a concept of reuse through libraries. So really, libraries will support for publishing and sharing components. Now, it's being open. We leverage, of course, the common standards, as I said, Java, JavaScript, CSS. The report designs are written in XML, so they're clear text. So you can actually go in if you want and modify a few things. Not recommended, but sometimes it happens this way. And being also in Eclipse, you have the integrated debugger. So what type of output formats do you get with BIRT? So you create a report design, and then you execute it, and then you'll get something to view. So, of course, there's going to be a web viewer. So we provide a web viewer for looking at reports. So there's going to be like a paginated web viewer. But there's also different types of emitters that you can use to take that same report and display it into other formats, like a PDF or Excel or Word. Now, being open, it means that these emitters are also, you can create your own custom emitter. Okay, so if you need something specific that is not included in BIRT, roll up the sleeves and you can write your emitter. We provide internationalization of labels and text, as well as localization. So that's critical, because in today's world, it doesn't mean that you write your report always in one language. It could be viewed by different people around the world, so you can have one report with labels that will be automatically translated depending on the locale that's being used. Okay, so it's valid for labels and as well as formatting of dates and numeric fields. And we support Asian characters and right to left display, Arabic, Hebrew. Okay, so I'll take you through a quick tour of the BIRT Designer, just to show you how that works. And whoops, that's the wrong image. Sorry about that. Where are you? I know what. Image went to sleep. Questions so far on the on BIRT? No. It's the after lunch hypoglycemia. I know that. I hate having my presentations just after lunch. Okay, so I'll sit down for this and just give you again just something very quick. So we're in Eclipse. This is the open source BIRT. There's not much difference between open source BIRT and commercial BIRT in terms of the designer. There's only like a few things that we've added. Probably the most obvious one is for the charts, they're HTML5. As an open source, they're standard SVG or PNG charts. So let me create a report. So I have a project. I'm going to create quickly a report. And let's call it up. Eclipse Con. So it's an RPT design. So that's what we create. And let me just copy that very nice select statement here, so I can reuse it in my report. So first thing I'll do is create a data source. So when you create a data source, you have the list of the different connectors that we provide. So those are the standard connectors in BIRT open source. So there's a JDBC for which you provide the drivers. There's also that MongoDB data source. There's a flat file data source, an Excel data source. The Pojo, which is the Swiss Army knife of the connectors. Pojo meaning that if you have a Java class that will give you some data, well, you can use that as a source to your project without having to write an ODA, which is what I've done in the Eurotech demo. And there is a classic model sample database that everybody loves. And it's actually a very nice database so that when you are on the forums, you can exchange. You say, I have a problem doing this. Sometimes we'll ask you, like, can you do it with classic models? Because the whole BIRT has it. Okay, so I'm going to create a data set. So now I have a connection. I can have a data set. And in this case, it's going to be just writing the SQL. And I have the SQL already created. This is like a cooking show. Huh? It's just like, now I have my muffins already, and I'm going to put the icing on top. And I have the data that I need. Pretty simple data. Now, by the way, you can have more than one source in your report, as well as more than one data sets. And if you have more than one data set, you can create a join between those data sets. So it's going to be a join that's executed in the report. So it's quite useful if you have data coming from different sources on which you couldn't do a join, but now you can do it in the report. Now in the palette, I have all the components that I can use in the report. So those are the standard components. As I mentioned, we have a web-based or web-oriented type of metaphor for designs. So I'm going to use a grid. I'm going to create a grid here, and the grid actually is nice for formatting your report. It's very similar to a table in HTML, and the grid will actually collapse and reformat itself if you have more or less data to show. And I'm going to create a chart. So I'm going to go to chart, and I'm just dropping that element in one of the cells. Now I have the different types of chart. As I mentioned, open source, you have the standard SVG, JPEG, PNG type chart. In the commercial release, you will have HTML5 as well. So I'm going to keep the bar chart, and I'll just flip the axis. And I can select the data. So I'm going to connect that chart to the data set I have created. And in that data set, I had 3 columns: product line, revenue, year, and total revenue. So now I can use these columns to create my chart. So I'm going to say by product line, show the total revenue and for each year. Okay? And then we can also, of course, format the chart. So let's say I don't want a title, and I'll put the legend horizontal below. Okay? And by the way, there's a way also of scripting the charts. The chart by itself, it's a chart engine. So you can actually go into the chart engine using the API and do some more fancy stuff. Okay, so finish. So I have a chart, and I'll just resize it a bit. Cool. And then I'm going to add a table. And the table, you can do things very rapidly sometimes in BIRT. You can just take the data set. I have 3 columns. Just drop it. Select all the columns. And voila, you have a table. I'm going to say put it in the middle of my cell. And now I can regroup inside my table, of course. So I'm going to group by revenue year. So now it's added a group header and a group footer. I don't need that column anymore. I'll delete it. And I'm ready to run or view my report. So from the report designer, I can just run my report, and we'll view it in the basic BIRT report viewer. Okay. And chart is having a hard time today. Okay, let's do it again. That's better. Okay, so I have my chart, not very pretty, and I have my report, my table, not pretty either. So we'll add some cosmetics to the table, and we'll do it very quickly. So what I can do first is add an aggregation. So let's go back to the palette and do a sum of the total revenue. Sum of that total revenue field, and we'll do it by the group, and then we can reformat these 2 numbers. Go here to the property editors. I'll say currency. I'll say currency here as well. Okay, and the final touch will be to add some styling to the table. Now, the styling I can do field by field or row by row. I can say like change the font, everything. But there's a concept of styles in BIRT that you can apply to many components. And the styles are based on CSS, and you can actually import your CSS. So I'm going to import here my CSS, and unfortunately I have to look at it here because I've changed the location of my project, so it's not going to. There we go. Pastel blue. I'll select all the different styles from my CSS, and they will be applied automatically to my table. So now I have a better looking report. Next thing or last thing I will do is add some pre-built components. Now, pre-built components, I've already mentioned the idea of adding like a logo. So you create a logo in a library. It's valid also for data sources. It's valid for maybe headers and footers, addresses that you always keep at the bottom. Things like that. In this case, I have something that's a bit more involved. So first thing I'm going to do in the grid here, I'm going to say at the end of my grid, it's for the, I'm going to break automatically, always. And then I'm going to add at the bottom of that grid, if I go to the resources, I have a library here. So a report library is it's like a report design. It saves that to an XML file in your project. You can just share the elements between the different reports that you have. And I have another grid here, which actually has a lot of things like charts and tables and a crosstab and all of that. Okay, so now if I save and run, so now I have a report that will have more elements on it. So I have 3 pages now, and page 2 is taken from that report library. Tap. Image is digesting its lunch also. Okay, it's called a demo effect. There we go, page 2 and page 3. And I'll show you, I think on page 2 there was this, the crosstab that had been created. Okay, so that's like in what, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, the idea behind creating reports. Obviously there's more to it. There's the scripting part where you can actually add some JavaScript to the different areas of your report. So if you need to do something a bit more fancy in your report. So go back here now to the presentation. And now just to give you a high-level BIRT architecture. So what we've seen so far is the BIRT designer. Okay, so it's part of course, of Eclipse. It's a plugin of Eclipse. We've separated the chart designer because it's kind of a project inside a project of BIRT, and there's a separate API for it. What we haven't talked about, and it's going to be the last few minutes of this presentation, is the BIRT engine. So the BIRT engine has different services. So there's a generation services that will obviously generate the reports. 5 minutes. There's a charting engine that will create the charts. The data service will actually get the data, and there's a presentation service that will take what's being generated. So what we generate is what we call a report document. It's a pivot format, and then it's going to generate different type of outputs depending on the emitters that you have. And there's a lot of, those are the standard emitters. Now, for all this, there are APIs. That's why I say it's a development environment. So you have the APIs for the design engine. So you can create a report using the tool, something I would say easy. And maybe at runtime, you want to add something to that design. So you can actually do it through an API. Pretty clever. And each section or each service of the BIRT engine also has its API. So the generation service, that's a scripting API, the one that you can use in a report and add some code through JavaScript. Charting engine, same thing, although it's done in the charts. The data service, we talk about the open data access, where you create new connectors, and the emitter API if you want to create your own type of outputs. Okay, so that's the high-level architecture. So BIRT designer creates an XML design, and then you pass it through the BIRT engine, you get the data, and you get an output. Now, in open source, obviously, you have to do some implementation. This is what we provide. So if you go to our site, to the developer.actuate, or if you go to eclipse.org/BIRT and you download BIRT open source, this is what you get. The designer in one download and the engine in the other download. Now, in terms of deployment options, well, I just talked about the first one, which is the open source. There's a commercial version of BIRT, which is called the BIRT iHub, which is which provided by Actuate. And actually what we've done is that we've integrated that BIRT engine into our server, our reporting server. Now the reporting server existed before Actuate. It has evolved, of course, before BIRT. I mean, it has evolved, of course, but it provides a lot of services in terms of security, running reports in batch, versioning reports, archiving reports, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so if you take a design and you publish it to the BIRT iHub, the whole job of planning a report and viewing a report is done for you. In the middle is BIRT On Demand, which is a SaaS or a PaaS version of the BIRT iHub. So you subscribe to it, you publish your report, you don't have to install anything. So I'll review very quickly the different viewing experience of a BIRT report. So now I'm going back to open source. So when you download the BIRT engine, it contains a BIRT report viewer. And the BIRT report viewer is the same one as I was showing you when I ran the report in the BIRT Designer. So it has a navigation toolbar. It will display the report. So it supports running reports and viewing paginated HTML. It has a table of contents, the concept of bookmarks, etc. So you just install it onto your application server, and then you use report viewer URLs in order to see the reports. So quick example of that is if I go here. So let me close these things, and I have a BIRT viewer. Okay, so this time what I'm doing is I'm going to my, in this case, Tomcat application server. I have installed the BIRT viewer. I'm using the frameset server to execute and view a report, and this is a report that I get into using the BIRT viewer. I can display straight HTML, so this one doesn't have a navigation toolbar, and it's on one page. I can do a PDF. I can do a report with a parameter page. So here I just choose which country I want to display data for, and it's going to limit the display. So very basic formatting. Here is going to be a reportlet. A reportlet is actually you take one component of your report and you display it on your page. Okay? Now, if I go back here, you can also use a viewer tag library if you want to embed reports into an HTML page. Although I start to consider this one obsolete because we have a new BIRT viewer toolkit that I want to show you, which will use the JavaScript API to do the same thing. So this one a bit obsolete. Now, the report engine API. So the first method, the BIRT viewer, is probably the easiest one. You take your report, you put it on your application server. Let's say it's Tomcat. You have embedded the BIRT viewer, and you have already a result. Now, in many cases, also, you may want to embed a report in a Java application. In that case, you'll need to do some integration using the report engine API. So in other words, you write a Java class that will configure and start the engine. We'll call the report, we'll run the report, and then we'll create, in this case, we'll just create a report document and save the report document somewhere, and then that document can be viewed. So this can be used also for planning reports. So you have a report that you want to distribute to many people, you run it once, it goes somewhere, people use a different URL to get to that report document. Okay? So this is the report engine API integration. This example has more of the PDF and HTML. Okay, the BIRT Viewer Toolkit. So this is the new generation of the BIRT Viewer. The first one was the straight open source viewer. What we've done recently is actually we've taken the commercial viewer, the one that we have with the Actuate BIRT iHub, and we've opened it to the community. So it's a free viewer. It has a more modern look and feel, and it also includes the JavaScript API for easier integration into applications of all types. Okay, so what does that mean? So the JavaScript API is something that we have written a few years ago for the commercial release. And what it does, it lets you really integrate any type of BIRT content into an existing web page, be it like JSP or HTML. So it uses AJAX libraries to execute report, call reports that have been already executed, call parameters and put these parameters on one section of your page. And the idea here is that you can build mashups or dashboards in HTML pages. Now, as you know, with demos, there's always something that goes wrong 30 minutes before the demo. That's why I bring my colleague and his laptop, so he can save my day. So I have to show you the BIRT Viewer on his laptop. The BIRT Viewer Toolkit, I mean. Okay, so with the BIRT Viewer Toolkit, so when you install it, this is actually the page that you get. It actually shows you an example of an integration into a mashup. So there's some blah blah at the beginning, some text and HTML hyperlinks. These two components here are taken from a BIRT report and are clearly integrated into an HTML page. In this case, this one here has been integrated with the toolbar, and this one without the toolbar. So this is really an embedded reportlet. Okay, if I look here at this link, this is a report with the new toolbar. Remember the old the toolbar was showing you was kind of a greenish. This one is a bit more modern, but it also has all the functionality, the table of contents, etc., the pagination. Now, the beauty of this is this is the type of code that you need to do to embed some. Let's see, I have the simple viewer here. Let me show you that. So this report embedded into an HTML page. All I need in terms of coding is this. This is using the JSAP, the JavaScript API. Okay, so it's quite simple. What you do is like you load the viewer, and then you initialize. The initialize actually is very important because this is where you can set up security as well. Okay, and then you create the viewer. You say run the report, set the report name, submit it. Boom, it's done. It's all through AJAX libraries. When you do the submit, you can actually have a callback class. So if something bad happens, you can put your error messages. You can chain things. Again, this is a very simple example, but you can make it a bit more complex. Okay. So the switcheroo, just to finish this presentation right in time. Actually, we're 4 minutes over. And so the JSAP. So final thing is, and I've talked about that, the BIRT Developer Center. This is where you get all the information about BIRT. Can't believe I didn't put the address, but it's developeractuate.com. And if you want to get the BIRT environment, open source, the designer and the engine, without downloading it, we'll give it to you. We have USB keys with everything on it so that you can install it when you go back home and start playing with BIRT. Questions? Either it's a good thing or not. All right. Thank you very much.